Hey everybody, welcome back to AmmoMan.com. My name is Kenneth Miller, again with Matt from Ballisticraft Incorporated. Today we want to talk about how to set up a night vision rifle for a bit cheaper than you would expect.
A lot cheaper.
Let's address the big problem here. It's a super expensive thing to get into. Not only is it expensive, but it's really hard to get your hands on the product to test it and evaluate it, whether it's for making your own purchasing decision or just to research. How can we take this concept and make it a little bit more amenable to the average person? I took the night vision rifle that we built out, that BCM, in our previous video, and I tried to apply all the same principles to one of our company guns, and this is what I came up with. It comes in at about a third of the price of that BCM kind of tricked out rifle. The reason we're making this content in the first place is to help show someone how they can build out a rifle that's still going to help them train to be more effective in general, whether you're a citizen, a law enforcement officer, or active military personnel. If you fall into those categories where you're looking at this equipment out of pure curiosity, you just like the education, or you're interested in crop conservation or protecting your chicken coop or all those other reasons, I'll be honest, what we're going to be delving into in this video is going to be a lot farther than what you need. If you're just looking for the price breakdowns, stay tuned for that, and I think that'll offer you a great solution. My impression of what we've done is going to be highly effective for the general populace to defend against predators. If you're looking at this for training, I think that's where the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about is going to be.
I agree. I think that, you know, all of this gear in this this scenario, building this budget rifle, it is what it is. It's a budget rifle. If you are using this equipment to protect your life or someone else's life, you need to rethink the equipment itself. This equipment is definitely made to improve what you know with your actual gear that you would use. If you're coming at this saying, hey man, this, you know, 1/3 of the cost should perform exactly with what my, you know, Gucci rifle is going to do.
Setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, you're definitely setting yourself up for failure. But if you're looking at this like, hey man, this is minimal cost, it still works, and I can still function with it at a level of training or conservation, this is some way to go. All right, so let's address the elephant in the room. This is a fighting rifle. The M4 carbine is a great weapon. It's been used through the military. It's been used through law enforcement, civilians for a long time, very effectively. It's very effective, right? It's out there. People understand how to use it. That is the primary function of this weapon. If you're buying this for self-defense, home defense, you know, conservation, into that conservation, why is it important to fight at night? Most of the animals that you were trying to eliminate for conservation reasons are predators, and predators are often more out at night. They're easier to hunt at night because you can actually seek them out in the fields versus going into terrain where you can't find these predators and eliminate them.
Some of the foundational principles when building out this rifle, I'm looking for a 1-to-1 form factor of whatever it is I'm interested in making a purchasing decision on in the future. So if I'm getting an IR device, a weapon light, an optic, I'm looking for as close as I can get to the real thing that's so far above my price point, but it needs to be close enough to where I'm getting good training value out of it. It's not necessarily the most important that it is a high performer or that it's the most effective, but I do need it to feel and function as close to the same, otherwise I'm not getting the same training value out of it.
Yeah, for sure. I think, you know, the old analogy, you know, you always fall back to your most amount of training, right? When you're building that form factor, that is extremely important to where whatever this trainer is or whatever it is I'm using it for, if this is something I'm using to practice for my primary, I need everything to be 1-to-1 ratio.
That's right.
So why a budget rifle? There's a few reasons you can have a budget rifle. Number one, like we talked about earlier, is about conservation, right? There is not a life jeopardy moment to me using this budget rifle. Whatever I shoot at is going to run off. Once I shoot at it, kill it, whatever it is. So that scenario, I can go kind of cheap on something. I don't have to spend, you know, $7,000 or $8,000 on night vision equipment if I'm going to go out and shoot rabbits in my backyard at 25 yards. So this is definitely why this option is great for someone who is into that predator control conservation type scenario. Okay, another good example of why you would want to build this rifle is that I would want that training rifle that mimics exactly what my actual everyday rifle or my, personal rifle is going to do. So, and with that, you want to match those, like, we discussed previously, that 1-to-1 form factor. I want the same mount, I want the same optic, I want the same everything as close as I can get it, all the buttons, bells, and whistles. So that way, when I do pick up my rifle, everything is familiar, everything is the same.
All right, so here is the setup. This is the budget rifle I was able to put together. This rifle cost in total about $2,200 when it was all said and done, base rifle included.
Yeah, that's pretty substantial.
It's pretty insane.
Yeah.
Comparatively to the Gucci rifle right there, why don't you pick that up and show them? This rifle we saw in a previous video cost us about, was it $7,000?
Yeah, roughly $7,000 how it sits right now, including the suppressor, which we don't have on the gun right now.
Correct. So as we look at this budget rifle, I'll just walk through the setup a little bit real quickly and we can see what we got. Matt, please feel free to share your thoughts on what I've done. So I went ahead and picked up a Stag Arms for my buddy to test out. I felt like this was a pretty decent option for maybe a mid to lower tier rifle. Again, the price point is pretty similar, so I think I probably would recommend bumping that up to a BCM when it was all said and done, and we can talk about that later. But this base rifle is around $1,400, give or take. I upgraded nothing. I tried to upgrade as little as possible. So I left the mil-spec charging handle. I left the stock that comes with it. I didn't add a high-rise optic, and again, it's a more budget-friendly optic. It's the Swamp Fox Liberator 2, I believe. That comes in around, like, I think $130.
Yeah.
We've got the SomoGear NGAL. That comes in around $460, I believe.
Now, and this is the potted version that you bought too, correct?
Correct. So
Okay.
for those of you who know about the company SomoGear, they are a airsoft company that creates one-to-one form factors, or very close to one-to-one form
Very
factor
close.
versions of real-world IR laser units. They've got a PEC version. They've got, I think they have a D-ball. I don't remember what model exactly. I know there's some companies out of Hong Kong doing some Mauls, C1s.
Yeah, the Mauls. I've seen the Mauls on the SomoGear, and this obviously the NGAL.
I went with the NGAL not because it's a one-to-one form factor with the PEC. I went with it because as of right now, their NGAL seems to be a higher quality build. It's made out of aluminum versus like a polymer type. Similar to the PEC, however, I think it's a little bit lower grade. So I wanted to find a budget option, but something reasonable that I think will be successful. So I'm not trying to go for the world here. But the reason I'm comfortable going with the NGAL was because it has the exact same selections as the PEC. It's just a little bit different form factor. And, maybe I want to buy the NGAL.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a one-to-one on that if that's what I'm researching and making a purchasing decision on. After that, I've got a little hand stop that my buddy 3D printed for me for free. So if you got people who can 3D print you some stuff, take advantage. Could probably get you a couple of other accessories on here. After that, I did the Streamlight ProTac HLX. I think this light is probably the best value you can get for building a rifle, whether it's budget friendly or expensive. There's just the amount of features you're going to get for 1,000 lumen output with a pressure pad, both momentary and a constant clicky cap. I mean, it's just like hard to beat that,
Yeah,
especially with
1,000
all
looms,
especially with all the mounting solutions they give you. So of course you can move on up and get a Surefire, but as you look at like this cost breakdown, these are nowhere near in the same ballpark.
No.
At all. And that's not to say that they're equal in their effectiveness, but when we kind of go through the testing we did on this rifle, I think it does prove that for a training rifle, for building good habits and seeing how a night vision rifle can be set up, I think this is one of the best options you're going to find, second to renting some equipment and seeing it for real in person.
Yeah.
Lastly, after that, I did the same thing I did on the nice rifle. I'm giving myself a little way to access my battery into my laser unit on hand. And then, just like any rifle, I think they deserve to have a sling, given you know how to set it up and use it effectively. After that, that's pretty much it. I didn't tune anything like crazy. I didn't change the trigger packs. I didn't change the buffer weights. So this is pretty much what you see is what you get.
If you're willing to go in and spend the type of money to build an actual mil-spec type of rifle setup for night vision hunting, I don't want to spend $3,000 on a unit without ever getting my hands on one. So, utilizing rentals is a great way to where you can get night vision and try it out and use it. The thing is, though, you're not going to be able to find that full spectrum of its limitations because, number one, you're renting it and it's like you break it, you buy it, right? Now, it is a good way to understand the controls, things like this, but you're also going to spend $350 to get it at your house for a weekend to get some practice with it, and that's not going to include the shipping for a $4,000 insurance product to go back and forth across the country.
Or hard use.
Absolutely hard use. I mean, if you rent something from someone, if I gave you my PEC 15 and it came back beat all to crap, I would not be happy about that. What it kind of reminds me of, and I'm going to kind of get ahead of myself here a little bit, is the NRL 22. Right? A lot of precision rifle guys have moved over to shooting precision 22 because, number one, it's a heck of a lot cheaper to do that and a lot cheaper to train, and you can still get those, environmental factors and all the things that you need for shooting precision, right? Yeah. Out of a tenth of the cost, essentially. I can see this budget rifle maybe on like an M&P 22, something that you can shoot all day long for $15-20, so this to me is kind of the way of the future that I would like to see clients that I train with, people that I train with, other people out in the population. If they're going to go and train night vision, you can do this on a budget just on the ammunition you're going to save by potentially using a smaller caliber. And I mean, I was absolutely impressed with the capabilities of this unit. Again, I wouldn't trust it with my life, but I would definitely trust it to train. The laser was very crisp. The illuminator, in all reality, was better than my PEC 15, which is a full power. But, again, I know who makes my gear for my gun that I carry, and I know that I can trust it. I've proven it myself. I've seen multiple people prove it. Now, this thing works, and it was very effective. I mean, we were engaging targets out to 300 yards on steel at night comfortably with this thing under nons. So, yes, it is very effective training, but again, I have to keep going back to that, Kenneth, that even SomoGear themselves, there's disclaimers all over their website. Do not use this on a live fire gun. But that's what we're doing, is testing what can we do to make this as realistic as possible without spending all that money.
This BCM rifle cost us a little bit over $7,000 to build out completely, as opposed to the budget rifle, which cost us about $2,200.
And guys, and that's including the rifles and those costs. You're talking a Stag, I mean, you go to a Noveski or something, you could double that. So going for a high-end gun versus building this budget build, I mean, most people go out to eat in a month enough to pay for this build.
Every single accessory you see, lights, lasers, optics, everything, all the accessories on here cost about $835. Why don't you tell us what a certain 3 accessories cost in total on that rifle?
So, keeping that in mind, the 3 most expensive things on this gun was, number one, the suppressor. It was the 7.62 tie by Huxworks. The second one, obviously, is the PEC 15. And then lastly, we have the weapon light. It's just Surefire Vampire. So just those 3 accessories alone were roughly $4,800 in cost.
A significant portion being the supplementary equipment you need for those, like tape switches, muzzle brakes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we included all that in that cost estimate. Yep. And again, we're running a Vampire flashlight. We went very high end with this stuff on here.
I mean, this is what you see on the internet.
Right.
This is what you see guys building out.
It is. But I mean, it just shows to get into a quality gear from basically here up, there's all your money. You're at $800 in accessories versus $4,000 in accessories, and that's just for the important stuff, not the extra bells and whistles. So does it work? Yes. Is it effective for training? Absolutely. So if you kind of look at this rifle, I mean, you can tell it's set up slightly different than the Gucci rifle, if you want to call it that. The pressure pad for the light is in the front, and the laser is pushed back. That's because there's not a pressure switch on here. So realistically, you're not going to run this and then run your light. So before the hate mail comes out, well, you're blocking your laser, this is a budget rifle. It's designed.
I don't even have an IR capability with the white light.
Right. I mean, so this is like, hey, I'm using the laser or I'm using the light. So this is what we did to make this work. And I thought it worked well. We started out in basic daytime drills at the course. basic malfunction drills, marksmanship drills, just kind of knocking the rust off. And then we started moving that into the low light, going through our passive aiming into our active aiming. And I feel like it performed well, especially at those 50-yard and in, moving in and around vehicles. Everything seemed to work just as effectively as the PEC 15s, the D-balls in the classes, the mauls, all of those. I think where this will fall off is, number one, we don't know the capabilities once you take this out and get it soaking wet. You beat it up for a long period of time. If my count is roughly right, we were probably 300 or 400 rounds into this gun by the end of the course. And, during that time, Kenneth zeroed the rifle, zeroed the laser, checked it 2 or 3 times during the week. We actually checked it when we first got down to Texas before everybody arrived. Still good. Tested it in the course, still good. So we had multiple checks on the zero on this laser, and we did confirm on a 223 it did hold up for the confirmation of zero.
It was easy to bring it out and shoot it at the range, but the problem is everyone at the course is suppressed. Yep. So you really see everyone's smiles go away and everyone's ability to like work in and around you once everyone's suppressed and there's just one dude without it. It's not about guys being babies or that they don't like the noise. It's the fact that it's very jarring to have everyone able to communicate very clearly. It's very calm, it's very collected. You've got complete control of your line, and you got one dude just blasting, 5.56 just out of his muzzle brake. And it just changes the tone of your communication, how you run your drills, and how you operate your line. I mean, we'll talk about it with a hog hunt. We didn't even get to use it on the hog hunt for that very reason. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, hog hunting can be weird. First night we were out, it was like so foggy you couldn't see 3 feet in front of your face. The next night we went out, you could see a group of hogs here and look through past them, and you would see hogs way down the road somewhere else. So not having your rifle suppressed really limited your ability to make an engagement and then move to another group that was potentially close enough within earshot of that and make that second engagement.
I think for being effective under night, I didn't see it being a problem. I could shoot with it all day. It didn't affect me. The muzzle flash was not a big deal. I can still use my nods. I mean, there's plenty of footage of me using it. The rifle is effective, but your environment, it totally transforms if you don't have that piece of equipment.
It does. And, I hate to put things in a training scenario because that's not how you should live by the gun, But, think of this without having a can, and daytime or not, it doesn't matter. At the range, it's fine. You have ear pro, right? You got eye pro, you got all these things. But if this was a defensive situation, or I was in my car, my house, or whatever, and I start blasting without a can, there is an interruption that's going to happen. So I do think the can does make you more of an effective shooter and a more aware shooter when you're out in that environment, for sure.
Now we want to see how effective it can be in more complex drills, both with passive aiming and active aiming using our lasers. We need to have a course of fire that, again, is repeatable, that we can put other rifles through and other setups through and still see how effective they are. So we need to be able to test how easy is it for the user to use their optics and their lights, lasers, whether or not they're suppressed. Again, with IR units, you've got, depending on the unit, a lot of different options. You could have a flood only, a laser only, a combination of the both, high, low power, viz. So there's so many things to kind of choose between. That's really where it comes in. How effective are we with this tool? Are we building good habits? And is this a one-to-one form factor that happens to be effective out on the range?
Yeah, and I think we did a good job setting this up to where we used all 3 of those functions, the passive aiming, the active aiming, and then the flow through like you had discussed. And, because each position, what you're doing on the actual range or scenario that you're running, it's important to be able to utilize all those 3 things
on command.
Yes. So kind of covering stage 1, the first thing we did was the passive aiming, and noticeably right off the bat, we had very low illume that night, right? And we were shooting a C-zone silhouette roughly at 100 yards starting that drill. And, contrary to most people's beliefs, just because you have night vision on doesn't mean that you can see everything like it's daytime, right? So we started seeing that limited capability even with that passive aiming, not having that illuminator at 100 yards. And this is a painted piece of steel, so you can imagine someone wearing, a pair of clothing or whatever where it's not as noticeable how difficult it would be to passively aim at that distance. And obviously, as we were rushing up into these new positions, the target presented itself a little more clearly, and it was a little bit easier. But past 50 yards, not knowing exactly what the loom was that night, knowing that it was very low, it was difficult till you got into that 50-yard range with that passive aiming.
Not only that, but you're trying to passive aim through a lower thirds optic, and then dropping into the prone where you're on uneven terrain. There might even be a hill in front of you, and then you're trying to get a tube behind a tube. That optic height makes a pretty significant difference. I found for the way I ran it, it was actually impossible to keep the rifle supported on the ground and get hits. I had to float the gun off the ground in order to even see the target. And that's how I got effective hits, I think, with both rifles.
Yeah.
So that's just a problem that reveals itself, especially on the budget rifle. I had to use the onboard illuminator for the NGAL. On the nice rifle, I at least have a vampire. The flaw in that came in that it splashes on the ground all around you.
Yeah.
It makes it difficult to see, as opposed to having only this really tight illuminator on the NGAL.
Yeah, and if you can kind of see, I shoot a Unity mount, the 1.93 mount, so my head is usually up, right? When you get to this lower 1/3, and this is, I believe, is lower than lower 1/3, but you start tilting your head, and if you can imagine those goggles on the front, right, you're starting to create these odd angles. And, it's manageable up here standing, but when you start getting in the prone, you have the magazine in the ground or rolling over, it is very difficult to get that alignment that you talked about with two pieces of glass lining up to make that work.
Yeah. I think, to be honest, the passive stage was just more difficult than I anticipated for either rifle. I mean, there were a couple of good runs in there, but for the most part, it's like shooting at 100 yards passive with not much illum is already quite a task.
It really is. I mean, like I said, night vision does not to cure all the problems that you have at night. So again, that's why we have not just a passive aiming system. Kind of going into that second part of that is where we started initiating that active aiming on the second part of stage 1.
Yeah.
So, obviously the viz was much greater because I was running that illuminator and the laser. Getting in and out of position is something that you have to keep in mind when you start going to that active aiming solution, right? What do we have here? We have a nice mechanical offset from bore to muzzle, so we have to keep that in mind, especially when we're using that VTAC barricade, getting down on the prone, punching in and out of those positions. The small angles on that board, things like that. Your rifle barrel and your laser and flood won't poke through there without splashing some of that back on you. Yeah. So that's something to keep in mind when you're running this laser. Is like, hey, what's my offset? Shooting off vehicles, shooting off all these things to get that correct.
Even going back a little bit to stage 1, we're doing passive aiming. The only way I could get effective hits shooting passive with either rifle, but it definitely was apparent with the absolute or lower third height on the optic, was you have to shoot both eyes open so that your left tube can see through the barricade.
Yeah.
I don't think that would have been even feasible at all with a monocular. Like, there's just no way that's going to happen.
I mean, it's doable, but you're just compounding problems.
Where my optic was is behind the barricade.
Yeah.
So it's just like, if you're going to tilt it to the right, I mean, you might not even see that dot. So it makes a big difference. Being able to go to the laser, I mean, you start to feel more comfortable. You can stick your gun through the port. As long as you can see that laser, you're going to be pretty effective, and your hold. I mean, that saved us a lot of pain.
Yeah, and I mean, just in and out of position, active aiming is much easier, right? Because I can rest my gun on a barricade down here even and still make that engagement. When you're going to that passive aiming, your
head's got to be behind it.
You got to be behind it,
yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, so I think on the one stage I did, stage 2, I think I was running the budget rifle. I was able to get effective hits, I mean, pretty much right away behind the barricade.
Yeah.
Because whether I could see behind it or not, on that last prone shot, I would just kind of move my head and just look around the left side of the barricade and see my laser. I'm still behind cover, just kind of poke it, and it was just like, oh, that was an easy day.
You know, and I mean, there's also the cons to active aiming, right? So, you know, depending on what you're hunting or doing, you know, potentially that other person may have night vision capabilities, right? So that's why, you know, it's important to talk about, you know, what we did for stage 3 of that passive and active, and being able to flow through both of those effectively.
That's right. Let's talk a little bit about what we decided to do for stage 3, the best way to incorporate all use cases for a night vision rifle setup using your IR flood and your laser, switching between laser only, passive aiming, active aiming, using some cover and concealment, trying to do some bounds, working in and around vehicles, and even some fast rapid shooting at different distances. I mean, that's incorporating a lot.
Yeah.
Tell me about how we kind of built that drill out.
So stage 3 was kind of set up to incorporate this crawl walk from stage 1 and 2 that we did previously with the active and passive aiming, right? So the range was set up with 3 vehicles, and it was set up way more of a 270-degree kind of battlefield, if you will, and it incorporated, you know, getting out of your vehicle, bailing out, getting your gun, you know, into a full load, which means one in the chamber ready to work, identifying the targets and engaging them effectively and quickly, either passively or actively,
As needed.
as
the shooter wants.
Correct.
No,
And then
no limitation.
not only from one vehicle, but you're going to have to move from vehicle to vehicle using that cover, staying on the safe side of that vehicle instead of the hot side of that vehicle while you're initiating those engagements. So it gets very easy to just actively aim, and that's why you kind of have to force yourself out of that concept of like, hey, utilize all the tools. When you bought an optic that's not vision capable, use it, you know, put it to work. That what if your laser battery is dead? You know, be effective with all your tools. We talked earlier kind of about the NRL 22 thing. I really believe that this is going to be a great tool, like you said, to work dry fire drills, put it on airsoft gun, a 22, something that is not your life not depending on that, you know, to train, to mimic what you have, and to save money and be cost effective. I mean, this is a cool setup. I mean, Kenneth's convinced me. I'm building this setup for me to train just like my personal rifle. And I feel like that there's a place for this in the world to use. And I feel like that just looking at this saying, oh, it's airsoft gear, this and that. Man, gear's gone a long way. And I don't care if you've got a Noveski or if you got a Palmetto State. Show me that you can use your gear. Train with your gear. Be effective, be efficient. This kind of stuff can accelerate your game for real.
Yep. I don't like it that there's such a limitation on entering into the night vision game because of the price.
Yeah.
I feel that pain myself. And I know how long it's taken me to get to a place where I can start to play with some of the tools. And I wish I would have had the option to get a $250 peg
For sure.
that was full power and worked and I can train with. It's the same form factor. And now I'm lucky enough to have, you know, this NGAL for like $460. That's going to save me a lot of time making a purchasing decision when I can get hands on it and play with it until I break it or it fails or it doesn't. Either way, it's good to me because it's a similar form factor, and lucky for us, it works very well. I mean, that laser is powerful. There's a lot of guys who've done some of the testing on the milliwatts and all that. I mean, it is a powerful, powerful laser. The illuminator is super clean. So looking at all this footage, make the decision for yourself. If you want to try it and you think it might be effective for you, I think you don't need to let the internet dictate that you shouldn't. The reality is we only tested this minimally with 5.56 rifles. I mean, there's probably sub 500 rounds, maybe somewhere roughly around 500 rounds on that unit. And no, it hasn't failed yet. No, it hasn't lost zero yet. But if and when it does, I'm not going to be surprised. Real pecs lose zero. Real models lose zero. Equipment fails. So I'm not too bent out of shape if and when that fails. I'll re-zero it and see how it goes from there and see if it's consistent. But so far, it's proven to be an effective training tool, and I'm excited to keep using it.
Getting into the SomoGear NGAL is probably about what it would cost you to rent something for a weekend. You know, so kind of take that in perspective, guys. I mean, you could go out and buy the PEC 15, which is even cheaper than the NGAL from SomoGear, and you could get a feel for it for much less of what it's going to cost you to receive and ship back a set of night vision and a laser from a rental shop.
That's right, and the fact is you'll own it, so it's totally up to you how you use it, whether you take care of it, abuse it, or just use it to play with the form factor. So the ball is in your court at that point after you make that purchasing decision. And I don't think either of us take the stance that we think that $460 is cheap.
No.
It just is comparatively cheap to compare in how you get in the game. And
yeah, it's a 10% purchase to get into shooting a laser in a flood.
I mean, there's just no way you can get that. And if the form factor is the same, and the laser does work under nods, and you treat it respectfully, and you only use it on an airsoft rifle, and it's under warranty, how else are you going to get that kind of value and touch points on your piece of equipment for that price? It's just unrealistic. If you guys are interested in watching us do some continual testing on the SomoGear or any of the other budget options we built this rifle out with, sound off in the comments. We'd love to test it. There's plenty of other calibers we could choose from, and I'm sure we could destroy it eventually.
Oh yeah,
so
no problem.
So if you guys are interested in that, sound off down below, and we'll see what we can put on the schedule. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this massive test between the two rifles, and I hope you've gotten something out of it. Thank you, Matt, for going through the project with me.
I appreciate being here,
and
man.
I hope we can do something again soon.
Absolutely.
All right, take it easy, you guys.